So one of the systems that we're going to be using this summer is a solid system from Applied Biosystems. And again, we'll generate over 50 billion bases of data in just a matter of months, compared to generating a few thousand bases over the course of 3 years by doing it manually. So now I have all this data. It turns out analyzing it is the problem. We just cannot have fast enough computers, fast enough algorithms. We have all sorts of different techniques for analyzing DNA, either in an evolutionary context or to figure out protein structure, function. To just search the databases alone to look for matching DNA is a major, major activity because the databases are growing so rapidly that you have to add new multi-terabyte disks to your computer servers every few months because you can fill up 5 terabytes in a single month of the new data that is being collected and streamed out there online. It's like, imagine, trying to store all of YouTube on your hard drive. It would fill up overnight, and then the next night, and the next night. It's the same thing we now have with the genomic data that's being collected. So we have to do a lot of very complicated modeling. So getting a really strong background in mathematics is the key to be able to do modeling, which is the key to get these algorithms and all of these computer analysis strategies to work. So no matter how much you may or may not dislike math, when I was an undergrad at Cornell, I took 8 semesters of it, even though I really wasn't very good at it, and I didn't like it, but I considered it to be my broccoli. It's good for you. You have to have a small dose. So I would encourage you to just keep at the mathematics because you're going to use that in any aspect of biology. Bench science now is probably 25% of my lab activities, the so-called wet work. 75% of our effort, of our time and effort, now goes into analyzing the data, filtering the data, comparing the data, and doing all of these things. And we're now using supercomputer clusters. I had a small one in my lab for a while. It became worthless. I now run our analyses on a 12,080 CPU supercomputer cluster, and some of those analyses now can take a week or more running all night long in the background to complete. So it's not, we can't just throw more hardware at it. We have to get smarter. We have to come up with better algorithms, faster algorithms, more efficient algorithms to be able to analyze all of this data. Some of my students, who you may have heard interviewed on NPR last Monday, and Chanel, are part of the group I am working on, which is in the laboratory teaching bioinformatics. So we're learning database search strategies and programming so that we can gather all of this data from the international databases or the data that we collect in the laboratory ourselves and carry out these analyses. I really, truly think the future is going to be in bioinformatics. For every 2 or 3 so-called wet bench lab people, there's probably going to be 4 or 5 people doing the analyses of the data that they're generating and suggesting new experiments to do their modeling approaches and their preliminary analyses of the data. So you really want to build up those skills. We're in fact doing this off of tiny little $300 netbooks using all free software, and we're able to do some very hefty lifting, some very major analyses in this. So if you go through the databases, you can find almost all the organisms known to man have had some sequence done. Some of it's very little, some of it's all the way up to complete genomes. And again, we can begin to compare all of the different genes from all the different organisms to each other and figure out how these genes work, how they interact with pathogens, how the immune system works, and all of this stuff. So learning and getting a good grasp on these techniques, again, is very key to the future of biology. As perhaps not everybody is cut out to be a computer programmer, but you would be shocked at how many of you can quickly generate short little programs in using free software on inexpensive computers to do some very amazing types of analyses. All the way up to very complicated modeling analyses, like some of my grad students and I published last year, actually trying to look at and interpret the fossil record using molecular genetic information. I'll go into how we do that in just a moment. And we can also, we just published a paper looking at modern humans from throughout Southeast Asia, from Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, southern China, and so forth, and can separate out some of the different groups based on the different frequencies of different alleles they have in some of the genetic markers that we study. But again, this is very computationally expensive, and the better you are at doing this, you can save yourself weeks of effort if you know properly what you're doing. So that's sort of the background, that basically in my lab we try to collect as much DNA data as possible, either ourselves or through databases, and then carry out these analyses. But what kind of analyses do I do? Well, I am an evolutionary biologist. I go by many titles: molecular primatologist, evolutionary anthropologist, evolutionary biologist. So some of the work that I have carried out over the last few years actually follows up on the last talk we just heard. And it's nice because I don't have to talk any of the details about HIV and AIDS. So here I'm taking this photograph of one of my former PhD students who now runs the Wildlife Conservation Society's program in the Congo. He has basically a territory the size of Texas and Alaska combined, throughout Central Africa. And here we see some young children selling bananas and a dead monkey by the side of the road. Now this is what's called bushmeat. Their uncle had shot this animal deep in the forest, brought it out to the road, and is selling it to people driving by, either who own a restaurant or just want to take this home. And the people in Central and West Africa very frequently have no qualms about eating a bush pig or a monkey or a small deer or chevrotain. It's meat to them. Unfortunately, these animals harbor a virus called SIV, the simian immunodeficiency virus. And it is the source of HIV, which has led to the AIDS epidemic amongst humans. It's unfortunate title, though, because HIV is SIV. It's not changed dramatically. It is the virus we caught from them. But because we're humans and we have hubris, we renamed it human deficiency virus, when it really belongs to these apes and monkeys, the so-called simians. After all, we are apes. We are primates. We've just given ourselves a loftier title, but we fall right within the primate and the ape order, and so there's no difference biologically. 99% of our DNA is identical to that found in a chimp. 99.8% of our DNA is identical to our extinct Neanderthal cousins. About 97% of our DNA is identical between us and this mandrill monkey. So we caught their virus and we get sick. The interesting thing about this is these animals don't get sick from AIDS. Almost all of the species of old world monkeys and apes found in Africa harbor a version of the virus that they have been living with for literally hundreds of thousands of years, up to millions of years. Some of them, if they're infected, they actually completely clear the infection. You don't find the virus at all. Those that have a low level of infection with these viruses don't get sick from them, or they don't get sick or very sick for 30 or more years, the equivalence of humans living with it for 50 or 60 years. And they have very low levels of illness, if any at all.